Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Grayzone live stream. We're doing this every single Friday. I'm Aaron Mate here with Max Blumenthal. A lot to talk about today. We're going to get into the proxy war in Ukraine, the celebration of the global elite in Davos, and the latest with the persecution of Julian Assange. Randy Credico is going to be joining us. Max Blumenthal, you are in Washington, D.C., where the Belmarsh Tribunal in support of Julian Assange is going on. And what are your thoughts today on on the state of the Ukraine proxy war? With you have this meeting in Davos. There's a huge pressure on Germany to send tanks to Ukraine. War hysteria is being ginned up. There's more and more acknowledgement that Ukraine casualties are rising, and we're going to get into all this. But I'm just curious as we start your overall reflections right now on where the war is at.
Well, first of all, welcome everybody. And this is the Grayzone Tribunal. I didn't make it down to the Belmarsh Tribunal. Did get to run into some of the participants there last night. We had a memorial for someone named Fritzy Cohen, who's the owner of a small hotel in DC that really became a gathering place for people who supported Assange and what's left of the anti-war movement here. And she died recently. And at the memorial, ran into Jeremy Corbyn, who's participating in the tribunal. Randy Credico put on this event, but he's not down at the tribunal. And there were several other participants there. So, these forces have converged on Washington. And we're going to talk about that later with Randy. But right now, I think it is important to talk about the World Economic Forum in Davos. We've done it before. We've had Jeremy Lafredo on. He actually covered it from Davos last year. He was one of those reporters who was trying to chase down global predators in the streets and confront them and to ask people what they thought about it, just average people on the street. And as Jeremy pointed out, this year is a little bit different. He covered something called Russia War Crimes House last year, where basically every year in Davos, the Russian delegation, which consists of people who wanted to be part of the global capitalist elite, hosted a Russia House where they featured Russian culture, Russian art, Russian food, and Russia House was seized in Davos under the auspices of the World Economic Forum and turned into Russia War Crimes House. Jeremy covered that, and we have a segment on our YouTube channel about that. But now that whole fervor for supporting the Ukraine proxy war has expanded massively, and that really is the centerpiece. The proxy war is the centerpiece of this gathering at Davos for a lot of reasons. Now, first, let's kind of try to understand what Davos and the World Economic Forum is. It's presided over by a German cartoon villain who looks like he comes out of Austin Powers Central Casting, named Klaus Schwab. And he is the author of a book called The Great Reset and the concept of the Great Reset. And on the right, they're focused on it, very opposed to it. The left has had a very muted response to it because the left, and I'm not just talking about the Democratic Party, but all the way to the radical left, they generally went along with all of the pandemic protocols, supporting lockdowns, supporting vaccine mandates, digital passports, and all of these mechanisms that were meant to usher in a Great Reset. But that wasn't the point of the Great Reset, although that was the subtitle of the book. The subtitle of the book by Klaus Schwab was The Great Reset, COVID-19. The Great Reset is about ushering in a fourth industrial revolution in which everything will be digitized and the biological will be merged with the digital. That's what's called transhumanism. And this will become a major source of profits for a global capitalist elite that is in trouble right now and is running out of profits and means of extracting surplus value from the global population because we're in a post-industrial era. The population that is meant to, that was supported and brought into the West or brought up in the West as, part of this middle class to industrialize the West is no longer needed Yuval Noah Harari, who's a contributor to the World Economic Forum, sort of the brains behind Klaus Schwab, refers to that part of the population in the Rust Belt that was outsourced with NAFTA as useless eaters, as a surplus humanity, essentially what the population in the Gaza Strip is to Israel. And so the Great Reset brings together predatory capitalism with some ideas that have been pushed in socialism, like UBI, universal basic income for that population to essentially temporarily keep them alive. So how does this tie into Ukraine? Well, first of all, under the banner of the Advantage Ukraine initiative that Zelensky's pushing, Ukraine is pledged to become a cashless, digitized society that is one of the most efficient technocratic societies on earth as part of its rebuilding program after the reconstruction after the war. And you can go to the Ukrainian embassy in DC and see Advantage Ukraine banners. Ukraine is open for business, but it's open for business to this class that's gathered in Davos. And they are a different capitalist class than the, extraction industry guys in Texas who are just trying to get as much money out of the ground as possible. They're thinking long term. They have a vision and they have a very clear ideology, which is spelled out through the Great Reset. And so Ukraine is this, now that the pandemic is over, and now that Afghanistan is over, Ukraine is the next thing that will help them accelerate this program. And of course, it's also a big cash cow for the arms industry and for big tech, which is making a lot of money with contracts. Me and Aaron, when we were banned in Portugal from speaking at Web Summit, this major tech conference, Microsoft came in and cut a $400 million deal with Zelensky's wife. So that's what this is about. Now let's listen to some of the rhetoric from inside the building. This is Sanna Marin. She is the Prime Minister of Finland, and she is young. She likes to party. She, leaked video came out showing her partying. She apparently enjoys Molly or something, someone, you should be able to relate to. She posts pictures of herself going to punk rock concerts and rock festivals, dressed like a Vice hipster on her Facebook page. And she shares like 800 kilometers of border with Russia. Finland was traditionally a neutral country, and she has broken that neutrality and signed up to join NATO. She is also a World Economic Forum Davos pet project. She was a World Economic Forum young leader. And you'll sense that it's almost like she's being animated here to say this, but this is the core message that you're hearing at Davos right now from its most telegenic, well-prepared puppet, Sanna Marin. Here she is.
We don't know when the war will end, but we have to make sure that it will end. Ukrainians win. I don't think that there's any other choice. If Russia would win the war, then we would only see decades of this kind of behavior ahead of us. I think other countries are looking very closely what is happening now in Ukraine. And if Russia would win, then it would send a message that you can invade another country, you can attack another country, and you can gain from that. We don't know.
So, Aaron, what's your first reaction to those comments?
So there's another clip too where she says we have to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. She says, I don't care if it's 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 15
years.
Yeah, and that's my fault. I meant to grab that clip. So that's the one I meant to grab. And that's as you pointed out on Twitter, you said something like Sanna McCain, right? Because that's what McCain said about the war in Iraq, that we have to stay there for as long as we need to. And what's amazing is if you're a neocon in Washington, you can't be more thrilled than with this current global political climate, where basically your agenda is now the mainstream. Like, whereas after the Iraq war and no WMDs turned up and, that turned into the mess that it was, the neocon brand was very discredited, and it was sort of disparaging to be known as a neocon. But now look at it. You have even like the face of modern Europe, these young leaders like Sanna Marin or Sanna McCain, sounding indistinguishable from a neocon. The same thing you can say about the progressives in the Democratic Party when it comes to at least the war in Ukraine, where they're all unanimously on board. And Ilhan Omar, who's supposed to be the face of the resistance, the left inside the Democratic Party taking on the establishment, she's lecturing anti-war protesters who ask her why she's approving billions of dollars in proxy war funding, especially after Ilhan Omar once warned that that would be disastrous. And now Ilhan Omar is lecturing people who take the same position she initially took and saying that they're basically repeating Russian propaganda. So that's where we're at. It's an incredible achievement for the neocons. And, on your point about the financial aspect of this, there's an article in the Washington Post by a columnist named Ishan Tharoor.
Yeah,
and
he's related to Shashi Tharoor of the Indian Congress Party, and he supports pretty much the liberal interventionist wing of the U.S. foreign policy establishment.
Yeah, so it's a dispatch from Davos because he's there covering it, of course. and listen to this. Larry Fink, CEO of BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, spoke of his plans to help coordinate billions of dollars worth of reconstruction financing for Ukraine, saying he hoped the initiative would turn the country into a, quote, beacon of capitalism. David Solomon, CEO of Goldman Sachs, spoke cheerily of Ukraine's post-war future. There is no question that as you rebuild, there will be good economic incentives for real return and real investment. So think about that. Like right now, in real life, Ukraine's being destroyed. Like its soldiers are being sacrificed. They've just lost some key strategic areas. Russia stepped up its attacks ever since Ukraine attacked the Kerch Bridge a few months ago. That led to a huge wave of Russian attacks targeting civilian infrastructure. And these people are in Davos, people who are architects of this proxy war, profiting off of it, already cheerily looking ahead to how they can turn Ukraine into what the head of BlackRock calls a beacon of global capitalism. So that's an illustration of how, Ukrainian lives are completely subordinate to the overall aim, which is just bleed Russia and also, increase their economic power, find new economic markets, increase their domination of the world. And this is an open celebration of that.
Yeah, exactly. Those quotes perfectly illustrate the point that I was making about why Ukraine has taken center stage at the World Economic Forum, along with climate change, which is bringing in renewable energy, which is a $3 trillion potential profit center for the capitalist elite and corporations. It's not really about saving the earth, and it's questionable whether renewables can actually supplant energy sources like extraction, like fossil fuels or nuclear. Nuclear is seldom considered here, but I got a little bit off the point. Precisely to your point, Aaron, here is Mikhailo Fedorov of the Ukrainian Ministry of Digital Transformation, which was in business officially with FTX, the scam of Sam Bankman-Fried, indicted crypto hustler Sam Bankman-Fried. And the Ukrainian government, as Arkit Klarenberg reported, was apparently given advance notice of FTX's impending demise and implosion ahead of time. So this is a video that was actually put out last summer to promote Ukraine as a digital fourth industrial revolution paradise after this disaster of war. It's classic disaster capitalism.
Let's look 8 years ahead. 2030. The history of the new Ukraine is studied all over the globe. Why? Because Ukraine became the most digital and convenient country in the world. Scripts have replaced bureaucrats. 500,000 former public servants are successfully integrated in the new economy. No more red tape, but paperless. No more banknotes, but cashless. Yes, we became the first country to abandon paper money. Ukraine now has the best tax system for the IT industry and the most affordable e-residency. Thanks to Ukrainian engineers and programmers, the R&D centers of the world's top technology companies operate successfully, and Ukraine ranks first in the world by the number of startups per capita. Ukrainian courts are guided by artificial intelligence, and all notarial acts take place online. Ukrainian customs is fully automatic and the fastest in the world. Customs clearance and car registration can now be done in 3 clicks from your smartphone. Because of war and internal migration, we have built the most flexible and modern digital education. Brave military and civilians get quality treatment with modern remote monitoring and e-health systems.
Brave
Ukraine
military
also
that we
has the most
continue to
effective
throw
cyber
Russian
defense in the
artillery
world.
forever.
After the horrors of 2022, Ukraine focused on security systems. Now every production facility has its air defense system, and the sleep of Ukrainians is protected by an ultra-modern Iron Dome. The
I mean,
Ukrainian
Israel's
government
Iron
is
Dome.
digital, more like an IT company in terms of the efficiency of implementing decisions, and one can register a land plot, start construction, open a business or get a license, and register a car or real estate from a smartphone automatically in one click. Ukraine is the freest and digital. This is all because international partners and the world's leading technology companies supported the Digital for Freedom initiative and united to help Ukraine recover through digitalization. Building a new Ukraine together, free and the fastest, brave and digital.
So that's it almost seems like they're happy about the war, that they're happy
Absolutely.
about the invasion. They're excited. And ultimately we'll talk about this later, Ukraine's anti-aircraft systems and some serious misfires, if you can call them that, in recent days. But they're putting forward this image which very much resembles Israel, of a Spartan state in permanent war that is completely protected from attacks, but brave soldiers will continue to be fighting, obviously, and they'll get the best medical care through telemedicine, which is horrible. Telemedicine is not going to give you the best care. But the subtext is permanent war in Ukraine, and it will bring in a digital utopia because Israel is in a state of permanent war. And Zelensky himself has said that Ukraine will be a big Israel.
They even name drop Iron Dome. I mean, they don't even hide that part. And of course, there are people who question the efficacy of Iron Dome in terms of its stated purpose of shielding the country from missile attacks. But regardless, that's just that's totally was my impression too, that this sounds like Israel. And of course, that's exactly what they want. Another client state of the US, digitized, running on the military industrial complex, and completely acting as a surveillance state on anyone that it chooses to. That is quite something. By the way, a quick side note, you mentioned nuclear power, and I'm not taking a position on this because I'm not informed enough, but I want to say that Oliver Stone, who we've interviewed before, has done some incredible work. He has a new documentary about where he's trying to make the case for nuclear power. It's called Nuclear Now! ! And I haven't seen it yet, and I just wanted to put that out there, that he's someone who's making the case for nuclear power, and he's faced some pushback for it. There was an effort to get his film banned, I think, from one of the festivals where he wanted to premiere it, and I don't know if he's right or not, but I just think it's important that he's making the case, and I think obviously his case should be heard because I don't believe in censorship, but I just think it's worth noting that he's out there trying to make that case right now for nuclear power.
Yeah, I mean, Stone has come to the conclusion. I'm trying to get our stream live on Rockfin, by the way, and it's having some problems. But Stone has come to the conclusion that nuclear needs to be part of the mix, at least because there are no carbon emissions. There have been serious safety issues in the past, Fukushima, for example. He makes the case, and it's based on a book called something like A Bright Shining Future about nuclear, that the safety monitoring and technology of nuclear plants has vastly improved, that it was unfairly attacked by the environmental movement, and many people in the environmental movement are beginning to pull back from that. I mean, you can even see that AOC, when she calls for a Green New Deal, she doesn't even rule out nuclear. But there are fanatics who I think believe that you can power the entire economy based on renewables alone by 2050. And these models by Mark Jacobson, for example, he's the key guy they go to. He actually lost a massive libel suit when his model was shredded in Scientific American. He claims that you can power the entire country of the United States by 2050 with all renewables. And no one considers, for example, what that would mean for land in the desert, for example, the Mojave, which has already been chewed up by solar farms. Solar requires so much land, and it doesn't work when it's dark. So the solar array out there in the Mojave Desert actually requires a gas-fired plant to keep it going. at night. There are all these problems there. And so Stone is making this provocative, but I think important case. And I think his documentary deserves to be seen. It's kind of crazy that it's banned, that this isn't part of the discussion. It's not allowed to be part of the debate. It's like, you know, trying to say that that there should be like negotiations on this proxy war, which is also totally forbidden.
Oh, yes.
Back to that. I mean, this is one of the most shocking moments from Davos, and hilarious. I mean, you gotta just kind of laugh at these freaks. This isn't just anybody though. It's the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who was a prime minister of Norway as a social democrat, I believe. And, you know, this isn't someone coming from the far right.
It is extremely important that President Putin doesn't win this war, partly because it will be a tragedy for the Ukrainians, but it will be very dangerous for all of us, because then the message to authoritarian leaders, not only to Putin, but also other authoritarian leaders, is that when they use brutal force, when they violate international law, they achieve what they want. And that will be a very bad and dangerous lesson. It will make the world more dangerous and us more vulnerable. And that's the reason why, if we want a negotiated peaceful solution to the war in Ukraine, we need to provide military support to Ukraine. That's the only way. Weapons, they are the way to peace.
Okay, wait, we got to hear that again.
Rewind.
Weapons, they are the way to peace.
And then you can see that NATO promoted that video. An official NATO logo, which is a converted swastika, comes on screen. So NATO is proud of what Stoltenberg is saying there. This is a message that they want to send. Weapons are the way to peace, which obviously is, I hate to use this term, but it is Orwellian, you know, war is peace, weapons bring peace.
Yeah.
But what your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, look, could be a great new anthem. Like maybe you two could take the lead on this and put out a new anthem for Ukraine proxy war called Weapons Are the Way to Peace. Yeah, no, look, but this is, I mean, see, what is even his job, Jens Stoltenberg, as the NATO Secretary General? He doesn't actually have a military role because NATO has a military council, so they handle that. So what is he actually, like, what's his job? It's basically to be a spokesperson for whatever the U.S. government wants him to say and to sell weapons and to hawk to taxpayers in NATO countries the need for them to spend their money on weapons. Like, that's basically what his job is. And so accordingly, he has to come up with creative ways to sell it. So I guess this is what he came up with. Weapons are the way to peace, because he recognizes that people don't want a war. They want peace. And so his way to sell them on more weapons is to say that this will help bring them peace. But look, I mean, everyone forgets this is not some case. Like, you don't have to support Russia's invasion to recognize that there's a long background to this, that Russia was provoked, that all the warnings from top U.S. officials like George Kennan, William Burns, that a NATO membership, NATO expansion was a red line for Russia. The coup in Ukraine, I mean, all the things we've talked about. But also, there's a background, and the background includes that Russia put out detailed proposals to NATO and to the U.S. about a year ago, just over a year ago, in December 2021. These long draft treaties laying out all of Russia's concerns about NATO expansion, about the positioning of NATO weaponry on Russia's borders, right? For example, because Russia doesn't have Russian weaponry in Canada or Mexico, but the U.S. has heavy offensive weaponry surrounding Russia, and Russia wanted to address all that. Russia also wanted to finally see the implementation of the Minsk Accords, which is the agreed-upon peace deal for ending the civil war that began in Ukraine after the 2014 coup, and that Ukraine refused to implement because the Ukraine government was basically taking the side of its far-right nationalists who didn't want any kind of accommodation that recognized the rights of ethnic Russians instead of Ukraine. So Russia put out proposals to address all of this. And what was the U.S. response? They wouldn't even discuss the core issues. You know, the core issue for Russia, for example, was NATO expansion and the placement of and the rollback of NATO weaponry in NATO states. Russia proposed to NATO and the U.S., like, you can keep your troop deployments, you can keep your offensive weapons, but except in the states that you've expanded to after 1997, we want to see your weapons rolled back there. So keep your weapons in all these states that you have, including ones that are pointed at us, but in the states where you've placed weapons after 1997, when you brought in like a whole new wave of states, including the Baltic states, those have to be rolled back because those are too close to us. And based on that, the U.S. refused to even discuss it. So the idea now that the only way to peace is through more war is just a lie, because there's already been out there proposals on the table to address this, which could easily be revived. But the official position is it's hegemony over peace. And any agreement that constrains the U.S.-led NATO system is deemed to be off limits. And so they just don't even want to discuss it. And who has to pay the price? It's Ukrainians, who will continue to be sacrificed under the mantra of weapons are the way to peace.
And the next NATO Secretary General, the one being put forward by the U.S., is the Canadian Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, who I don't want to call her a Nazi, but she definitely is pretty enthusiastic about Nazis in Ukraine.
Her grandfather was a Nazi. I mean,
her grandfather, Michael Chomiak, indirectly worked for Adolf Hitler. Yeah. His publication, which was based in Ukraine and in Poland, was funded through Hitler's information ministry. He worked under Joseph Goebbels. He lived in the seized property of a Jew in Poland. He supported the Nazi Germany, and she lied about it. And then 2 Russian diplomats in Canada who brought this up before the media were deported for telling the truth about her. And not only that, she worked for the Encyclopedia of Ukraine, which her grandfather, Michael Chomiak, started. And if you look in the Encyclopedia of Ukraine, the way they talk about Stepan Bandera is pretty positive. The leader of the Nazi collaborator OUNB forces. She also wrote for a Ukrainian diaspora publication. She was put up for this job when she was starting her journalistic career in Canada, which ran ads for neo-Nazi summer camps for youth, Bandera Summer Camp, which these ads in the classified section of the paper that would have Chrystia Freeland articles would actually have Galicia SS logos and iron crosses. I mean, it's pretty sick stuff. And when the war erupted in February, she went out to a rally in Ottawa and held up an OUNB red and black flag, the flag of the Nazi collaborator partisan army in Ukraine. So this is the person that the U.S. is putting up, at least right now, has announced as its possible preference for NATO Secretary General. It really speaks to what NATO is and always has been. But, moving along, I mean, there's just endless comments at Davos, we are standing with Ukraine until this war is won, by General James Cleverly. But here's a more, I think, consequential figure, and it's the leader of Poland, Andrzej Duda, the president. And, he's right there on the border with Ukraine. I always, find it peculiar how they balance the historical reality that Bandera, the hero of the post-Maidan regime, has slaughtered so many ethnic Poles, and he's being honored officially by the Ukrainian parliament, and Poland's support for this war. And I guess it's just the shared hatred of Russia.
And I know very well that Ukraine needs weapon, as I said yesterday, and once again, weapon. Weapons are crucial now because this war is really very difficult. This is not the end of the war. Russia is not defeating. They are still Russians. They are still very strong.
They're still Russians.
A lot of Russian soldiers in the front line, and we are afraid that they are preparing. Now they are preparing themselves for the new offensive in a few months, probably.
Well, that's true.
So this is crucial to send now additional military support to Ukraine, especially modern tanks, especially modern missiles to defend Ukraine, but first of all, to stop Russian offensive.
Okay, Aaron, Germany is being asked to send Leopard tanks to Ukraine. These are very good tanks. And Germany's closer than the US. And Germany has said, well, we'll send them if you send the M1A1 Abrams tanks. And the
Yep.
US is saying, well, these tanks are too heavy and the engine is difficult to repair. The Ukrainians aren't trained in them.
It's interesting. And, look, it's possible that the U.S. is being sincere here when they say that the Abrams tank, it's too clunky, it wouldn't work for Ukraine, it requires too much maintenance. It's also possible they're worried that it would be embarrassing for them to send it and have it perform badly, which has happened to the U.S. before. Like in Syria, for example, I think some of its weaponry sent to the rebels didn't perform so well. That's possible. Another possibility, though, and this was raised recently by a German parliamentarian who is really principled, one of the few, and her name is Savim Dagdalin. And she wrote an article basically saying that a main motivator, she thinks, for this push for the U.S. for this pressure by the U.S. on Germany to send German tanks, combined with the U.S. refusal to send its own tanks, is that the U.S. wants to basically push Germany into the crossfire, so that if there's any Russian retaliation for sending tanks off to battle Russian forces, that Germany faces it militarily and also politically, because Germany has always been, it's always had ties to Russia. Angela Merkel had a somewhat cooperative relationship with Putin. There was, of course, the Nord Stream 2, which the U.S. successfully sabotaged. But Germany is still the key to an off-ramp. And there's always been an effort to rupture relations between Germany and Russia, because if there's no ties between Germany and Russia, then U.S. dominance is secure. So what she's saying is that, this could be an effort by the U.S. to get Germany into the crossfire militarily and politically, to ensure that German-Russian relations are permanently damaged, which would be the case if Germany is sending off tanks to fight Russian forces. And it's just funny to see this play out. And Germany has always been hesitant about this war. Before the war, it tried to engage in some diplomacy to avoid it. Schultz said to Zelensky, there's that, this was reported in the Wall Street Journal that, Schultz begged to Zelensky, like, how about we'll give you security guarantees as long as you pledge neutrality, not to join NATO. And Zelensky rejected it. This was days before Russia invaded. And so Germany's made an effort, and they didn't want to commit to killing the Nord Stream 2, but finally the Biden administration forced them to shut it down. And then to make sure that it permanently was shut down, somebody blew it up. We all know who it is. It had to have been the U.S. and its allies. And now Germany's facing this new round of pressure. And if history is a guide, I do think they'll cave. But it's interesting to me that they haven't so far. And I think that the aspect of why would the U.S. be so insistent that German tanks go to Ukraine, but not the U.S.'s own tanks? You mean to tell me that U.S. has no tanks that are suitable for Ukraine? So on the one hand, the U.S. is claiming that, they're fighting the new incarnation of Hitler. They're fighting to save civilization and save democracy from this tyrant. We have to do everything we can. But yet they're also saying, we can't send you our own tanks. So something's going on there. Maybe they don't want to get embarrassed. Maybe they don't want to get embarrassed because the Abrams tank is a bad tank. I don't know. Or they just really want to sacrifice Germany and make sure that Germany and Russia never have any hope of having ties again.
Well, I think that's it. And we have Carlos del Toro, the U.S. Navy Secretary, stating that if the proxy war continues for 6 months more, it may become, in his words, challenging to maintain supplies to the U.S. military. In other words, the Ukraine proxy war is hurting the U.S. military, though it might be very good for orders from U.S. arms manufacturers and the MIC. And then at the same conference that Del Toro spoke at, Admiral Daryl Caudle, who's the commander of the U.S. Fleet Forces, also from the U.S. Fleet Forces Command, also from the U.S. Navy, said that the Navy might get to the point where it has to make the decision whether it needs to arm itself or arm Ukraine. So that's one issue there, is that the U.S. cannot continue to supply Ukraine at the level it needs. And now we need to tie that in to another development. And this is, something that is obviously being managed through hardline elements around the Pentagon through their media stenographers. So it's unclear how serious an initiative this is, but it's an initiative to attack Crimea. And there is a plan to consider attacks via the Ukrainian proxy on the Russian Federation, as I consider it. Crimea is the Russian Federation because a majority of people in Crimea wanted to be part of Russia instead of to be part of this post-Maidan regime that hates ethnic Russians and hates the Russian language and is outlawing the Orthodox Church, the Moscow Patriarchate of the Orthodox Church, which is the Orthodox Church. And so from Russia's point of view, it's seen as an attack on Russia. So if the US were to do what's being put forward in this plan, which Aaron isn't sending M1A1 tanks, but would be sending M1 Bradleys, which have powerful guns and are capable, would be used to try to break Russian lines heading towards Crimea, supplying Bradley fighting vehicles, supplying long-range missiles to attack Russian bases in Crimea. That would be the US attacking Russia. That would be something that we never experienced growing up as Gen Xers during the Cold War. In fact, nothing like that happened during the Cold War. And if you were to tell me this was something that would happen 5 years ago, I would have torn what's left of my hair out.
Yeah.
I mean, this is crazy.
It's nuts. It's nuts.
So does the US even have the capacity to supply them for these attacks? Well, this is what Ukraine wants. Ukraine wants at least this is what the figures in Kiev want to do. And why they want to do it, it will strengthen Kiev's position in any future negotiations. However, the US is willing to risk escalation. And the hardliners interviewed in this piece, including Philip Breedlove, who's a former US NATO representative, who previously called for US armed intervention in Ukraine. They're saying that there's no way that Russia will deploy a tactical nuclear weapon, and that's why they think it's possible to start attacking Crimea. So they're daring Russia to use a tactical nuclear weapon. That's what this is about. That's where we're at here.
It's nuts. And let's assume they're right, that Russia won't deploy a tactical nuclear weapon. Okay, that's the best case scenario. But you know what Russia will deploy? It will deploy more of its heavy weaponry to target Ukraine on top of what it already has. They're basically asking for a lot more Ukrainians to die, because that's what Russia will make happen if Crimea is attacked with US-made weapons. And we've already seen a iteration of that when after the Kerch Bridge was blown up with, not heavy weaponry, just a truck bomb. That's when Russia escalated its attack on civilian infrastructure inside of Ukraine massively.
The electrical grid.
Yeah, as was predicted. Before this happened, the New York Times back in September reported that U.S. officials are baffled that Russia has avoided civilian infrastructure, and that they feared the most dangerous moments were yet to come. I'm basically quoting the Times there, and they're saying this based on what U.S. officials are telling them. So U.S. officials knew that if Ukraine continued to fight rather than negotiate and escalated its operations, such as attacking Crimea, the Kerch Bridge, they knew it would invite a Russian retaliation. That's exactly what happened, and Ukrainians have suffered for it. And now they're saying they want to do even way more, because we're not talking about a truck bomb of a bridge, which ultimately didn't hurt Russia that much at all. We're talking about using heavy U.S. weapons to attack Crimea, which Russia considers now its own territory. And as you say, the majority of the population there agrees. And they've been trying. I mean, there's been a movement in Crimea, a sizable one, to break off from Ukraine ever since Ukraine was founded in 1991. So it's like the idea that you're now going to help Ukraine go after a territory where the majority of the population doesn't want to be a part of Ukraine and considers themselves to be a part of Russia. It's pure insanity. And the best case scenario is that Russia doesn't use nuclear weapons. It just kills many, many more Ukrainians when it fires back. Which,
well, a tactical nuclear weapon could wipe out an entire Ukrainian division, as far as I know, and that would be the purpose of it.
Yeah.
and what would the response be? First of all, from the media, the neocon Beltway press corps would be pushing Biden in the Rose Garden to directly retaliate. I can guarantee that.
Oh, of course.
I mean, that's what they did for Trump when there were pictures of dead children in Syria. So what do you think they do if a tactical nuke wipes out a Ukrainian division?
I mean, we'd all be done with. That's what would happen. It would be over. So these people are constantly willing to flirt with that, and they want to take the risk, and they're basically counting on Putin not to be a madman. not to. They're completely counting on him, whereas they're willing to take all the risks.
The U.S. has always counted on Russian restraint
Yeah.
as it escalated.
Yep.
At the same time, it paints the Russian leader as Hitler.
Exactly. It's
We
so
don't-
incoherent.
He's
They-
Hitler. He's going to invade
Yeah.
Poland and Russia, and he's going to go into France. He's going to fight a two-front war, just like he's Hitler, but he's restrained, and we think he's rational, and we can attack his territory, and we're willing to do that. And really what this shows is desperation, because they know that Ukraine cannot hold on the way the war is shaping up right now after Bakhmut, because it will be kind of a war of attrition.
Yep.
They call it a World War I style trench war, whatever you want to call it. Ukraine does not have the manpower or the materiel that Russia has, and therefore they're going to try some desperate escalation to force Russia to the table. And it's not going to happen. It's not going to work. Even if they do it, it will not force the negotiation that they want. They're delusional. These are just the most dangerous people on the planet. And they're all quoted right there in the New York Times article. But I want to move on quickly. Just
They
to do
acknowledge,
another-
they acknowledge, let me say quickly, they acknowledge in that article that U.S. officials know that Ukraine can't take back Crimea. So they know that. But they still want to risk
right.
catastrophe over it.
They don't even want Ukraine to. Tony Blinken has even said Ukraine should only recapture the territory that was taken after February 2022.
Right. Exactly.
We got Randy Credico in the studio right now, and we're going to do one more quick segment related to this issue, and then bring in Randy to talk about Julian Assange and the media's performance on Assange. But there's some interesting developments out of Ukraine, and let me kind of start over. So, welcome to the Grayzone. I'm Max Blumenthal with Aaron Mate, my colleague, and we've been talking about the Ukraine proxy war. And there have been some interesting and disturbing developments out of Ukraine, some palace intrigues, specifically related to one of Zelensky's most influential and certainly most prominent advisors. His name is Alexei Arestovich. He's sort of a psychologist, a professional information warrior, and a very prominent, well-liked Ukrainian media personality who also has some pull among the ethnic Russian population. He speaks to them in their own language and has always argued for them to be included, even as he's put forward the idea that Ukraine can win this war. And one of the things Arestovich is most famous for is predicting a Russian invasion back in 2019, declaring that it would be inevitable, that it was unavoidable, and that Ukraine had to prepare for this confrontation. So he's seen as sort of a sage. But Arestovich made some comments that got him in political hot water. Let's take a listen and watch, because I guess you're going to have to watch and read the subtitles. Okay, so Lieutenant Colonel Arestovich said live in Dnipro, excuse my Slavic pronunciation, the missiles. Well, let's just pause it for a second. So this is what NATO media is saying. The Washington Post had a cover story that Russian missiles attacked a major apartment, a large apartment block in the city of Dnipro in Ukraine. And Britain is going to send battle tanks. Sort of, you see how they combine it in the headline to justify the tanks based on the Russian war crime. And there's a photo of the apartment block. It said that scores are killed and injured. This is Reuters coverage. Obviously, the death toll has gone up as Russian missile hits apartment block. The Guardian. This is the major story, the big war crime. And here's the most influential advisor.
Три маленькие и остальные большие. Три тактические, остальные большие.
Ну, то есть возможности в Днепре сбить вот эту ракету хорошей возможности не было.
Нет, по ее сбили, она упала.
Dnipro was shot down by air defense, after which it fell on the entrance and detonated. I
Ну,
mean, this
кроме
is a
того, там
military
проблема с
advisor
едким
and a
дымом. Это
presidential
верный признак
advisor.
их 22, потому что он заправляется крайне токсичным топливом. И это, судя по всему, тут еще разбираться, но можно предположить, что оно стало еще и дополнительным элементом поражения токсичное топливо как таковое.
То есть возможности в Днепре сбить вот эту ракету
There's
хорошо
no other
Ну,
opportunity to shoot
Нет,
this missile
по
in
ее сбили, она
Dnipro
упала
in
на
a good
подвес.
way. No,
она упала.
did it fall in the entrance? Yes, but
Да,
it
но
exploded when
как
it
бы
fell.
она взорвалась, когда упала.
Okay, so there is video showing 2 detonations on the apartment block there. It strongly suggests that a Ukrainian battery, a SAM battery, brought down a Russian missile, which was not targeting that apartment block. And then this has been happening across Ukraine. Aaron, I'm sure you remember when a Ukrainian SAM battery misfired and landed in Poland, and then Zelensky went to the media and said, Russia has attacked Poland. Russia has attacked NATO territory. This is an Article 5 attack. You need to respond. In other words, he was basically deploying a de facto false flag to get the West to intervene directly. And it turned out, and even Reuters and all the legacy media outlets had to call it out and say, nope, but they're not really retracting the reporting on this.
But initially, remember, Zelensky was backed up by an anonymous senior U.S. official who told a reporter, I can't remember, it was with Reuters or Associated Press, who said that, yes, our assessment is that this came from Russia, that Russia launched this missile. So Zelensky was pushing a lie that Russia bombed Poland, but he was backed up in that by somebody from the U.S. And that led to a reporter who reported that being fired because he didn't obviously check his sources. But I think that reporter should have outed who his source was, because his source gave him false information that could have sparked a world war, which I think is grounds to, ignore journalistic code there and out your source, because this is someone who risked a world war in the U.S. government. And it's, look, I don't know what happened in this missile strike. I do know there are people who've shown the videos that you talked about where, showing what looks like to be an air missile deployed, but I don't have the capacity to judge. What I can say, though, it's telling that this top advisor to Zelensky, who's very, very close to Zelensky, had to resign just for saying that. It wasn't enough for him, and I don't know. Did he ever actually retract it? Did he say it's not true what I said?
He was sort of forced to issue some kind of apology.
Yeah.
What's happening in Ukraine is there are criminal codes now that if you say things in public that are deemed to harm the war effort, you go to jail or you're disappeared. And people have been killed for doing this. This is on the books now. And the mayor of Dnipro, the city where this took place, has actually called for the Ukrainian secret services, the SBU, to arrest Arestovich. So he's in hot water. He's actually gone on to denounce Zelensky and the government for attacking the Orthodox Church, arresting clergy. He's kind of a loose cannon right now. So it's a very interesting scenario, but he, yes, was forced to resign. Now, this is just days after this took place, this palace intrigue. Something else takes place in a very similar way. And we here at the Grayzone we're not making an attribution on why this helicopter crash took place, but it's very suspicious. So I'll show you a tweet by Vera Van Horn. I can't endorse her attribution, but she says that Ukrainian air defense shot down a Ukrainian helicopter with the Ukrainian Minister of Internal Affairs and his deputy on board, that it crashed in a residential area, killing 16 people, including 2 kids. Now, definitely the helicopter went down under mysterious circumstances. The Minister of Internal Affairs, what was he doing? Was he on his way to a secret negotiation? Remember that one of Ukraine's top negotiators was in Belarus meeting with the Russian delegation. And when he came back to Kiev, he was killed, assassinated in the street by the Ukrainian SBU. So there is a precedent for this. And here's the crash. It seems to me like something is happening in Kiev.
Well, that's
Yeah.
tough. I mean, it's all speculation, and we are, there's no way that we can know, and it could have just been a crash, which happens with helicopters. But I do think it is definitely significant that you're seeing an aide to Zelensky being forced to resign like this. And to me, I wonder why he said all that. And that wasn't that wasn't the only thing that he said. He also criticized Zelensky, or he acknowledged that Zelensky is attacking members of the Orthodox Church who align with Russia. He said something about that too, and I'm wondering why would he be doing that, especially since he supported many of Zelensky. He supported Zelensky's policies, and he's been a very effective propagandist for the Ukrainian government side. And I wonder, is he seeing maybe the writing on the wall that maybe he thinks Zelensky is losing his grip on power and he doesn't want to be around for that? So he wanted to get himself fired. I don't know.
Well, not just Arestovich. There are rumors that Zaluzhny, the chief of staff of the Ukrainian armed forces, is also at odds with Zelensky, because Zelensky, he's the media man, he's the PR guy, and he's getting off on projecting this image of strength and total victory to the West. But then you have in Soledar a defeat at the hands not of Russian regulars, but the Wagner PMC divisions, and then the impending defeat in Bakhmut, where Zelensky came to Washington, compared it to the Battle of Saratoga, the pivotal battle that turned the tide and convinced France to sign a formal treaty with George Washington and the American forces against the British, and they've lost. So Zaluzhny, seeing his men getting chewed up there, this was the meat grinder. He didn't want to necessarily be there. And there are rumors that Zelensky said, no, you must stay. This is the Battle of Saratoga. So Zelensky may be pinned down from all sides. Arestovich is also clearly upset about the way that the entire ethnic Russian population, some 35% of the Ukrainian population, is being turned into an official enemy. But I want to just go back to something here before we switch. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me say on Zaluzhny quickly, the Ukrainian commander, he had that interview recently with The Economist where he said that, yeah, we can win, but I need this and this and this and this. And The Economist noted that what Zaluzhny was asking for was more than the combined arsenal of all European NATO members. So basically what Zaluzhny was saying was that it's impossible for us to win. Like, that was his tacit way of saying that. And that was interesting. And it's obviously, he's more grounded than Zelensky, who's just a political actor. So it is something really to keep an eye on. And the resignation of this aide, I think, is the latest phase, is the latest sign that that this is not tenable for the Ukrainian government, that Zelensky's been a disaster for them, and I think people are jumping ship.
Definitely. And just because so many people in the chat have raised this, I think it's a really strong point. Take a look at the crash site of the Minister of Internal Affairs and his deputy's helicopter. I mean, just look at the spread there. That's huge. I mean, if you look at, for example, high-profile helicopter crash, Kobe Bryant, it didn't look like anything like that. So you see several buildings have been torched. It suggests that there were other explosives involved. It suggests something other than just a helicopter crash. I'm no Elliot Higgins.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is outside of my lane. I have no idea.
That's
I have no
outside
idea.
his lane too. My lane is video games. So
yeah. I have no idea. It looks horrible, and it crashed on a kindergarten apparently, which is terrible. And look, people can speculate all they want. I just, I don't have any qualifications to weigh in on this issue, so I'm fine to stay silent.
Well,
if you want to speculate.
I think we need to look at the crash site and ponder that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to now switch to a different topic. Welcome to the Grayzone. I'm Max Blumenthal, and I'm here with my colleague Aaron Mate. The struggle to free Julian Assange continues into a 13th year. Julian Assange spent many years holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London. He then was transferred to Belmarsh prison, and he remains there being tortured and persecuted, often in solitary confinement away from his family. And there is heightened, unprecedented activity for the struggle to free him. And we want to bring in someone who was early on one of the strongest advocates for Assange, hosting Julian Assange on his radio program at WBAI Pacifica Radio in New York, where we now have a show, Grayzone Radio, every Sunday at 6. And that's Randy Credico. Randy, welcome to the Grayzone.
Boy, I look very gray here. I guess I'm sorry. I'm in one of Fritzy Cohen's very dark rooms here at the Tabard Inn. And I don't know, you know how non-bright these rooms are. So they have no overhead lights. There's nothing in this room. But anyway, maybe I won't be on that Center for Countering Disinformation hit list by kind of obscuring my face here on this show. What a fascinating show this has been for the last hour. I've loved it. You guys have given us information that you can't see anywhere else on the mainstream media, whether it be CNN, CNBC, MSNBC, or Democracy Now!, or other mainstream media outlets. So congratulations for what a wonderful show this has been. I've learned a lot. Thank you, Randy. And thanks for being a part of it. This is definitely not your first rodeo at the Grayzone. And, you know, we were both at the tribute to Fritzy Cohen, who played such an instrumental role here in DC in supporting the Free Assange movement. Jeremy Corbyn was there. A number of people John Kiriakou was there, Sam Husseini, yourself, Margie Kunstler. So many people have been Stephen Donziger was there, important figures in this movement. And you, Max, I want to just say, Aaron, if you haven't seen Max's stand-up, his political stand-up, he is fantastic. He actually stole the show last night. I must say, with all due respect to all the other comedians who are all great, you stole the show. That was one of how you went on at the end last night after all of those comedians and kicked ass was really quite an accomplishment. Congratulations.
Well, I have seen Max performed, and I can confirm he kills it. I saw him open up for Jimmy Dore in Chicago, and he did an amazing 15-minute set, and it blows my mind. I think stand-up is the hardest thing in the world. Yeah. And Max has chops.
Nobody wanted to follow him. I got to tell you, nobody wanted to follow Max. No, I'm not following Max. So I said, I'm putting you on at the end, and you can just cut loose. And he did. So you got to watch the video of him. He was, especially the pratfall that you did. That was classic. That was just, you got to see Max on fire. You were on fire last night. Seriously.
Well, the video and the sound aren't very good, but it's at Consortium News. There's a live stream up there at their YouTube channel. Everyone's invited to watch it. Most of my Jimmy sets aren't online, but I feel like I can be my real self as a comedian. I don't have to pretend to be serious. Yeah.
Well, you were very serious. You made a lot of serious, cogent points, but you were able to do it in a way. I mean, it's like the way Dick Gregory would do it. You know, there are very few people who can make political points and do it with a sense of humor. And, it's a natural gift that you have. But I've known that for a long time.
Well, I just would say, for me, it's natural to do it in a room full of people who agree with me and share the same sensibility. And that's the same at Jimmy Dore shows. And I don't think I would ever bring it to a general audience, especially at a DC open mic where you have people from who are working at Lockheed Martin in the crowd. I mean, maybe just to troll them, but it just wouldn't go over well.
I said it last night. Listen, for me, it's the same thing. I can't deal with a bridge and tunnel crowd. There's no way I could work at what's really a Chuck E. Cheese pizza comedy club, Chuckles or whatever. I did well over my comedy career politically in three areas. The Upper West Side of Manhattan, way over there by Columbia, the Lower East Side over there by Tompkins Square Park, and Havana. Those are the only three places where the audience really got into. And Randy, by the way, has a great sense of humor. You both have a great sense of humor.
Randy, you were killing it when you did the Johnny Carson show.
Yes.
Until you dissed Jean Kirkpatrick.
Yes.
Reagan's demonic ambassador to the UN.
You know what?
That's when Johnny turned on you. But before then, you had the audience in the palm of your hand. They were loving it.
Yes, I know.
People should look up that clip. It's on YouTube.
Yes, I think it is. I've never seen it myself because I hate watching myself on television. It's like this actor, George Raft, never watched one of his 225 movies because I always find something that I don't like. and it makes me uncomfortable. Yes, I was doing Reagan. We were talking about the Sandinistas and all of that stuff back then, and I was doing this and that, and then I said something about, I don't know what it was, about Reagan staff and cabinet, Weinberger, William French Smith, the whole crew, and I said, and Jeane Kirkpatrick, and I said, you look at her and analyze some of the things she says, you have to ask yourself seriously, did Eva Braun die in that bunker in 1945? So that was it, man. That was a kid. But the talent coordinator, Jim McCauley, may he rest in peace, he saw that. I had to do that.
Hey, I found it, Randy. Let me play it. This is from a documentary about Randy Credico. It's free on YouTube. It's produced by Jack Black, called 60 Spins Around the Sun. That's how I learned about Randy through this, and then I reached out to him, and that's how I know Randy. But here it is.
Randy Credico. Randy.
Handsome young man.
Yeah, look at that.
Look at those teeth.
That was the greatest moment in my life in show business. To hear that you got the Tonight Show you got the brass ring. You know what I mean?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Johnny. And what a great introduction. As he said, I do political impressions. And
I'm doing great. I'm doing the Reagan, Jesse Jackson, and Ted Kennedy, and all this. And there was a point where Freddie de Cordova said, "This guy's great, right? He's coming back." I thought that I would get the chair. I was doing that well. There was a point where I was going to get the chair. Everyone wants to sit in the chair next to Carson. I mean, he's the king, so you're waiting for the king, to judge you. You submit yourself more to him. You're playing to him, and I was more than to the crowd.
Speaking of Reagan, he did well the other night. Surprised a lot of people. He was quite effective, especially in the beginning when they asked him if there was a secret war planned in Central America after the election, in which he said,
"Well, let me just say this. You take all these countries, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Guatemala, now. You line them up diagonally, and you will see that they, in fact, run right into the state of Illinois. I was born and raised in the state of Illinois. I can recall when I was a kid, going to the county fair, livestock and exhibits and first prize.
I was doing very well.
What did you say that rubbed them the wrong way?
There's a couple of things.
Like what?
Jeane Kirkpatrick. She is the UN ambassador, and she says a lot of interesting things. As a matter of fact, if you examine some of those statements, you got to ask yourself seriously, did Eva Braun die in that bunker in 1945?
Somebody said, whatever you don't do, Carson, I did like...
Yeah, so...
Yeah. That cost me a lot of money. That cost me a lot of money because my uncle, who was a State Department cover in the CIA back in the 50s in Argentina, ended up owning a lot of cruise ships and landed in Italy. And he had no kids, and I was his favorite. And he financed me in 1984 so I could actually work on going on the Tonight Show. Gave me like $5,000. He loved me, but he said just before he died in 2001, he said, "You're out of the will now. You're out of the will." I said, "For what?" "Because of what you said 17 years earlier on the Carson." He was a big reactionary. He loved Jeane Kirkpatrick, Kissinger, and all these neocons. And it's true. I lost 500 acres of land just northwest of Naples because of it. 2 cruise ships and a couple of houses in Coral Gables. That one line. All right. So at any rate, I'm here today, still busting my ass.
It's really good insight when you look at the court jesters of today, whether it's Jon Stewart with his podcast where he cannot bring himself to actually challenge 2 of the biggest warmongers on the planet, Condi Rice and Hillary Clinton, or all of the late night comedians, Jimmy Kimmel and
garbage.
Stephen Colbert, who's sort of a parody of the former self-satirical nationalist comedian that he's the realization of the former parody that he was at the Colbert Show. All of these comedians are the ultimate propagandists for empire and every other psyop. And so you drop one line and that's the end of you.
These guys are not that bright. First of all, they don't know. They're not that aware. And second of all, if they are, they're just self-censoring. Jon Stewart, I knew him. He was some rich Long Island kid that broke into comedy, and he's pretty well educated. But he also hammered on one of these shows. He hammered Susan Sarandon after 9/11 when she said that U.S. foreign policy had something to do with 9/11, which it did.
Yeah, I
All right.
remember that. Yeah.
So Susan Sarandon said that, and he excoriated her on the David Letterman show. And the David Letterman actually had John Ashcroft on, and they all applauded when they went after Lynn Stewart. And she was put in jail. And John Ashcroft said, we got this lawyer who had the SAM violations, and he actually had people standing up David Letterman. So none of these, they
killed her in jail. They killed her and only released her when she was dying of cancer. This is Lynn Stewart. She defended the blind sheikh, and they cooked up some fake violation to jail her because she had humiliated the federal government again and again, getting off all of their top targets.
Yes, it really was, none of these guys. Carson went after Jim Garrison way back in 1968 when they came out with that indictment of Clay Shaw and everybody. He went after him and hammered the Garrison report. All right. But other than that, Carson was, would take some chances. Steve, what's his name? I can't think of his last name right now, but there were other talk show hosts before that were on late night. David Steinberg, and others who had him back in the 70s, who had talk shows, who would actually do political humor with a bite. None of these guys do. There's nothing that these guys do right now. It's like Wolf Blitzer doing political humor on the Jimmy Kimmel show, or Ari Melber, or Nicole Wallace. Any of these individuals, it's no different. They reflect, their humor is in the same vein as the kind of conversations that you would see on CNN or MSNBC. There's nobody out there taking any chances at all. Either they're stupid. Who's the guy who hosts the Tonight Show now? I don't even know his name. There's no way I'm going to watch it. They're just going to fall in line, because if they don't fall in line, they're going to lose their gigs. You can't go up and say what you guys are saying. Nobody can say. I mean, as Aaron knows, he was going to come in last week. I couldn't even say where I was hosting a luncheon for Scott Ritter.
That's right.
I could not do that because the place where he was going to do it a few days earlier had to cancel. Because they had these Ukrainian red and blue hysterical people calling up the place, and they had to cancel. This is like 1917 to 1921. If he did anything, I mean, it's like Lenox Hills Hospital was German hospital and infirmary. They had to change it. You couldn't hot dogs from Frankfurters. So we have the same hysteria going on right now. Aaron was going to show up the other day, but he got in late. And we sold out that place by me saying one thing on WBA. Thank God you guys are on Sunday at 6:00. It's really a gift to WBA that you were there. And one place, I said it on Friday, 2 days before I'm doing this. Email me. You have to, and I'll tell you where it is. And it's $40, and you get a book and lunch. And so I got the place packed. Not me, but Scott did. But I,
well, Randy, listen, that's a good transition to the topic we wanted to bring you on for, which is Julian Assange.
Sorry, I'm so verbose.
No. Listen, we love it. All the staunch and consistent advocacy you've done for Julian Assange over the last many years is just as you stepped up to basically save the day for Scott Ritter after, pro-Ukrainian government elements pressured the restaurant where he was going to hold an event to cancel him because he's critical of the Ukraine proxy war. You stepped up and you organized quickly this new event, and you saved the day. And it was very noble what you did. So just as you've been willing to step up and sacrifice yourself and put yourself out there for principle, you've been doing the same for Julian Assange for a very long time. We just wanted to honor that today as the Belmarsh Tribunal is going on in Washington, D.C., and many prominent progressive luminaries are there speaking out. But you've been consistent from day one in support of Julian Assange. You host a show called Assange Countdown to Freedom. You've been in touch with Julian. You actually interviewed him on that show
Right.
early on, right? And
Yeah,
since
back
then
in 2016, 2017 twice, and then he got locked up. The second time I interviewed him, that's how Assange Countdown to Freedom came into being. It was April 11, 2000. I got to make this point, 2017, because he had done a show that's on WBAI in the morning, but it's also its own show, Democracy Now!, early on April 10th, 2017. And he got ambushed. I mean, totally ambushed by Amy Goodman and who was it? Juan Gonzalez and this character by the name of Alan Nairn.
Alan Nairn, who's a great journalist, has done a lot of really important stuff. But yeah, that interview was an ambush. It was.
Well, you take a look at it, and they haven't apologized for that.
Let's take a look at that, Randy, and then we're gonna let's get your comments. After we take a look at this, as soon as I'm able to bring it up. This is part one.
They need to make a public apology for this. They have to atone for it. They can't just it didn't happen. It happened.
It happened. Okay. Well, these are some highlights I pulled right before this live stream because I wanted to discuss this because Amy is moderating the Belmarsh Tribunal despite having done this, and this was just utterly disgusting. But of a part with what democracy has become.
Democracy Now has become. DemocracyNow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez.
Well, in October, The Intercept published a conversation between Glenn Greenwald and Naomi Klein about WikiLeaks' decision to disclose thousands of John Podesta's personal emails. This is part of what Naomi Klein said.
I would add, it's not just that they didn't curate it and just dumped it all, right? They are dumping it, but they are doling out the dumps, right?
They're dumping it and doling it out, right?
Clearly to maximize damage, right? So they're not just saying, hey, information wants to be free. Here's everything we have. Journalists have a field day, go through it, right? They're very clearly looking for national media attention. You can tell that just by looking at the WikiLeaks, Twitter feed, and timing it right before the debate.
That was Naomi Klein in October. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Your response to some of her remarks?
Well, I think it's a bit rich for Naomi Klein, who's a very wealthy woman sitting up there in Canada, to be accusing a political prisoner who's been detained for the last 7 years without charge in violation of 2 UN rulings without getting her facts straight.
My view of this is that
this is Alan
during
Nairn.
the campaign, WikiLeaks often suggested that Trump would be less dangerous than Clinton.
No, we didn't.
I think you did.
No, we didn't.
I think that concept is wildly, gruesomely mistaken. There was the argument. Well, it's
fine for you to say that, but you should understand that no, we didn't.
However, I would note that the Trump campaign thought that WikiLeaks was on their side. Now, the idea that Mr. Assange just suggested that Trump and Clinton were equally dangerous, two different deadly diseases, I think is wildly and gruesomely mistaken.
Wildly and gruesomely. He likes saying wildly and gruesomely.
And, he did not know, because I spoke to him that night, and he asked me to do the show the next day. And he did the show the next day. Hence, that's how Assange Countdown to Freedom started. He and John Pilger were on the next day. And because he was so unsettled by that attack, the three of them, they were supposed to talk about whatever the new revelations were. I think it was Vault 7. But they didn't. They went right. Vault 7 had been released, and they couldn't talk about that. And then 3 days later, you have Pompeo 4 days later coming out. I guess he felt it was okay since the putative left is attacking Julian Assange. We may as well call him a hostile intelligence force or whatever he called them. So that was a very bad move by them. And I urge the three of them to make a public apology right now because they haven't atoned for it. You just can't act like it didn't happen because it did a lot of damage.
Aaron, wasn't there a component of that interview where they started to challenge Julian Assange on being essentially in league with or colluding with Russia?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it was in that interview, but there's definitely one interview where, I don't think Alan Nairn was there for that, but I remember this where there was, Adam Schiff was spreading all this innuendo about WikiLeaks and Assange colluding with the Trump campaign, and Randy Credico, our guest, being the back channel somehow, right? All this ridiculous stuff. And I remember Democracy Now! Basically parroting that, taking it seriously as if it actually might be true, and repeatedly pressing Julian Assange on it. And at some point he says, I don't have time for this. This is just really stupid. And I'm sorry Julian Assange said to Amy on air, he said, I'm sorry to see that you're falling for this. Because
he said that he says, I can't believe you're buying into this. And she says, buying into it, Julian, we've got evidence. I mean, you of course have debunked all of this stuff. I was never back channel. Roger Stone never had a back channel. You've made that clear a million times. You've debunked Russiagate and the whole idea that there was some kind of collusion, and especially it's so ludicrous. Look, I mean, she should say, wait a second. Julian Assange, a journalist, has this hot story, and just a week before he's going to release it, he's going to give it to Roger Stone to have it, and Roger Stone is going to sit on it. I mean,
it's so dumb. But amazingly, Randy, I mean, Democracy Now! I mean, this is an example of where I think Democracy Now!'s editorial standards have fallen on some key issues, not all of them, but on some key issues. And this is a good example. A few years later, in 2019, they brought on their top guest on Russiagate was Marcy Wheeler, who is just he was a leading.
You got to be kidding me.
Yeah, no, yes, she was their top guest on Russiagate, and she's a just unhinged conspiracy theorist,
a nutcase. She's a complete nutcase.
Well,
I've had so many conversations with her. She actually believes all of this stuff that
she does, and so she came on Democracy Now! To make the case that yes, Roger Stone did have advanced knowledge of WikiLeaks releases, and basically making the case that there was a back channel between Roger Stone, WikiLeaks, and the Trump campaign. And this was aired uncritically on Democracy Now! Of all places. And so now that Julian Assange is being persecuted, I think they've wised up, and now they're covering his story more. And Amy Goodman's there moderating the Belmarsh tribunal today. But it's an example of how at times when it mattered, so many people that progressives have counted on to deliver the news factually and to have a backbone, have some critical thinking skills, have failed. And also at a time when it was so incentivized to sell out Julian Assange, because after 2016, Julian Assange became public enemy number one, even more so than he was before in the eyes of liberals. And accordingly, there's been, there's that mention in that clip of The Intercept. They published all these stories disparaging Julian Assange, taking seriously the idea that he secretly conspired with Russia. And so there's been all these incentives in media to throw Julian under the bus. And Randy, you deserve a lot of credit because you have not jumped onto that bandwagon. You have stayed consistent.
Move on? Aaron, talking about The Intercept, Jeremy Scahill did the same thing to me in 2017 as Chris Hayes did a few days earlier. Jeremy Scahill had me go to his plush studio there on Broadway by Kmart. This beautiful, it's right up there with Yahoo and these other outlets with their own espresso bar and everything. And I went to this room, and he had dug up some tweets that I made. He bought into the Roger Stone back channel connection. So, and
a lot of people got duped. Yeah.
I don't know. I got some fundraising email. I haven't seen Jeremy in years, but I hear from him through fundraising emails for the billionaire-owned Intercept.
Yeah.
I don't really see anything else he does. So
I don't know. He's working for an auctioneer. All right, he's an auctioneer guy.
But Randy, look, the point is that you stayed consistent in your support for Julian, and I just want I want to know from you, what's it been like for you? Because I think there have been times probably when you felt very alone in this struggle to keep Julian's name on everyone's minds. Well, talk to us. So talk to us about what it's been like and what you've done, because you've organized events and you do a weekly show. So talk to us about the work you've been doing for Julian.
Well, I started that show, and I got a lot of pressure, even from my own colleagues at WBAI. There are people there who were so furious that Trump won, or it was even during the campaign. I would put guests on right? I put guests on that are good. I had Roger Stone on a couple of times that year because I'm not going to just do a one-sided thing and only put hardcore left people on. I wanted to get other opinions that year. That's what a journalist does. I'm not a journalist. You guys are. So I took, I had him on, and then, I had Julian on. And then, I got a lot of heat in 2017 by a lot of people that, are liberals that have shows there. I think most of them are gone by right now. But and it's been a lonely experience. But a lot of people who back then disagreed with me over the years, over the last 6 years that I've been doing that show on Assange, and I've done about 250 shows. I know it seems like insane, but I consider this to be the most important case in the world, at least in this country right now, that because if he goes, then they have a reason to go after the Grayzone. And where am I going to get real information about what's going on in Ukraine and the Russian, the denazification of Ukraine? Where am I going to get that except for at the Grayzone and a few other outlets? Scott Ritter, everyone is on the other side. So what you're doing is a lonely experience. What I did with Assange is a lonely experience. How lonely is it for you guys to be doing what you're doing? That's the question.
Well, we're all here together, and
yeah.
I mean, Aaron, we're not
Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Heart Clubs Band.
I don't know what the Progressive International really is. At some point, we were like invited to be a part of their media thing, but I knew that, I don't know, they have some media consortium, but I said I didn't even like pay any attention to it because I knew that if
listen, I don't know anything except I like this guy Shreko. He's been on, and Margaret was on today, and Stefani Marizzi was on today. I didn't go to it because I was doing this show, and plus I had a radio show to do at 3:00 today. I don't know anything. I have no idea. But the fact that they did this event today, it all helps. There are other people that have gone on. They've come on late. Other outlets have come on late and they've joined. They've jumped on the bandwagon. It's better that they finally came on. Other outlets, you've been doing this for years. I've been doing
what I would just say, Randy, is what I was going to say is, we have been doing this for years and we've done real reporting on it. Working with you, we broke some serious stories, but we're not invited to be a part of the Belmarsh Tribunal, and Amy Goodman is, and that says something about the kind of infrastructure that's moving in. And there is a very tightly controlled network that's co-opted or occupied a swath of the what's left of the U.S. left, and I can speak for myself. I'm not really invited to be a part of it, and I don't really mind because I'll continue to do the work I'm doing, let it speak for itself, and carve out my own space.
Well, let me tell you something, Max. You've been invited to every event that I've done over the last. You know that every event in D.C., in New York City, you came up there. I had people there, you, Roger Waters, others that have been on board this from the very outset, not Johnny.
Well, you're the real deal, Randy, and you're fully grassroots. A lot of these organizations are not. And like, I just am suspicious of any organization that has Helvetica font on its website. But the point is, like, at our Assange rally in New York, there were people of all political stripes there for one cause. It was a very big rally and a powerful rally. It was for Assange, but there are other organizations or little tiny parties where, and they have such a strong ideological criteria for participating in their actions. And for example, if you questioned healthcare workers and frontline workers losing their jobs because they didn't want to take an experimental injection, those organizations will drum you out. And that's just one of many ideological.
That's wrong. That's wrong. That's totally
wrong. And the point I made last night at the memorial for Fritzy, who brought so many different kinds of people together in DC, is that we need to overlook these petty differences because we're up against the wall in the US in the heart of the beast here. And we can't be maintaining these such strict ideological barriers. We need a broader umbrella of resistance. And that's not what a lot of these organizations want to do. And I can see that through my exclusion. They all know what I do. They all know my work. They all know that for years I went to bat for them. But because, for example, I questioned I challenged the mandates that they were obsessed with, although they don't talk about it anymore, I'm not included. And so much of the the
in
anti
Syria too. In Syria as well.
Syria was the first real thing where the
Yep.
Palestine solidarity movement fractured over that. Once you start challenging the dirty war and calling out the white helmets or saying that this 6-year-old girl, Bana Alabed, is not a legitimate Syria expert, then you had like the whole NGO wing of the Palestine solidarity movement. You know, the Rockefeller brothers were funding Jewish Voice for Peace and U.S. campaign against the occupation and turning them into part of the NGO industrial complex. And if you spoke out against Syria, well, you couldn't be a part of what they were doing with all the money flowing in. And now I see the same thing happening all across the left, this NGOification. I'm never going to be a part of that. The Grayzone's never going to be a part of that. Our work is going to speak for itself, and we're going to challenge these psyops because we live in a psyopathy, as Consortium News put it. And we need to always be catering to an audience that questions these and helping them unpack it. So that's where we're at with Assange.
Well, let me just say this. Let me add on to that, Max. You and Aaron have done incredible work on Syria, and you don't see that. I want to go back to Democracy Now! They don't do balanced work, even if you want to call it balanced at all.
They suck.
They suck on Syria. They were not good. They have not been good on the Ukrainian stuff. They always have this one woman on talking about atrocities committed by the Russians, but nothing about what Ukrainians have done I don't know if they did anything about what this foreign minister said who just resigned under Zelensky. If they did anything on that, they certainly
they don't. Randy, they don't do what they used to cover. So we used to, but back when I was there at Democracy Now!, we covered the Maidan coup. We covered the role of the U.S. in placing weapon systems in Poland and Romania, the expansion of NATO, all the provocations. If you go back and watch the old Democracy Now!, you'll see better coverage of the current Ukraine war than the current Democracy Now! Because we used to have on people like Stephen F. Cohen before he was banned as a guest on Democracy Now! After I left. Oh yeah,
he was banned from Democracy Now! That is amazing.
I was banned from Democracy Now! John Pilger was banned from Democracy Now! He wrote me a long note about how he was banned because one of their major funders from the Lannan Foundation decided he didn't like him.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I know Soros is a funder, and I know that the Ford Foundation and these.
I don't know if they're funders.
I don't know who the funders are, but they get big money. They have take a look at that studio. It's as big as MSNBC.
It is. I mean, I used to hang out with all the Democracy Now! Crew, and they were like my buddies in New York, and they're like what I look to as real grassroots journalists. And something changed dramatically. Don't have time to go into all of it and speculate. I would just say, they did great work in the past, and now I would consider Democracy Now! To be an enemy. I wouldn't approach them as some friend of the anti-war movement that's gone astray. I consider Amy Goodman to be completely on the other side. She pushed the Syria dirty war. She pushed the white helmet psyop. She pushed at every step of the way. She pushed Russiagate. She hosted freaking Kurt Eichenwald 4 times.
Well,
not once, not twice, not thrice, but 4 times. The biggest fraud of Russiagate. She sandbagged Julian Assange. She's now pushing the Ukraine proxy war narrative. She pushed the Uyghur genocide narrative to gin up a new Cold War with China. It's nonstop on Democracy Now! It's not the exception to the rulers. It's an accessory to the ruling class. And there needs to be a substantial challenge. And that's what we're going to.
I think she's trying to get Barbara Starr's job. You know, I think this is all about getting Barbara.
How is it that PBS
job? She wants Nicole Wallace's job or Joy Reid's job. Maybe she wants, and this is what she's doing now. She's looking to get a spot on MSNBC or CNN, but I don't watch it anymore. You talked about all these people that used to hang out with at Democracy Now!, which would be a lot of people because they have a higher turnover rate there than a beef processing plant in Texas. People slaughterhouse. You know, they go in, they're good for a couple of weeks, and they say, all right, that's enough. I'm getting out of here. Am I right, Aaron? I mean, they do have a high.
Well, you know, I don't want to comment on workplace stuff because that's an internal matter for them. And look, I was there for 10 years. I lasted 10 years. So
okay, I'm sorry. I don't want to be.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
I can attack her the same way I can attack MSNBC and CNN.
Fair enough. Listen, everything. Listen. Of course, this is all I think fair criticism on the substance in terms of what their editorial choices have been. I think a complete betrayal of what I thought the show stood for, at least stood for when I was there. And
I don't watch it. I haven't watched it in years.
Yeah, but anyway, look, I think we've hit on this topic enough. I think we can move on and close it out today, Max. If
yeah,
all right,
yeah, and but so Randy, let's end with some words about Julian. Where are we right now? So right now, yeah.
You know what? Look, the CIA, when he did Vault 7, it's the CIA that's behind this. If we think it's Merrick Garland, everyone's afraid of the CIA. You know how big their budget is. You know how many people they have doing work off the books. They don't want him. You know, Seymour Hersh confided to a friend of mine, like, now that they've got him, they're not letting him go. So that's how bad it is. It doesn't matter. We definitely need a Mandela kind of movement out there to get him out. But it's like Noriega. They didn't want Noriega talking. Not that they're similar in what they did, but he had plenty of stuff on the CIA, George Bush and all that. They bounced Noriega around the world on these phony drug charges. He went from Miami. He couldn't talk about what he knew about the CIA. Then they took him to France into prison there. And then he discovered Jesus, and they put him in a prison in Panama, and then he died. So that lasted, about 15 years, 20 years, Noriega? So they're doing that to him, and that's how bad it is. We are dealing with an organization, the CIA. That's it. It's us against the CIA here.
Yep, that's what this is about. And if there is any move for any reason at the Biden administration to let Julian Assange out, if they recognize that they've psychologically and physically destroyed him, and that it's time to let him out, or that there is a real precedent here for press freedom by continuing to jail and torture and kill him, then there will be the CIA coming out and doing what the FBI did with Leonard Peltier at the end of the Clinton administration, where they had a march down the street in the middle of Washington, D.C., down East Capitol, I think, of FBI. Every FBI agent was required to march against the freedom of Leonard Peltier. So the same thing will happen with the CIA and Assange. This is about a political war with a secret government that has a $80 billion plus black budget authorized by Congress every year to carry out operations around the globe, including against us, and to kidnap journalists who are not even U.S. citizens and hold them in prison and destroy them. That's what this is about.
Defund the CIA. All right. Forget about the police. Defund the CIA. They've 74 years. They've done nothing but evil. Unadulterated evil for 74 years. I asked Ray McGovern the other day, can you tell me one good thing that the CIA has done for this planet, domestically or internationally? He said, well, the intelligence side has done some good analysis, but the other side, with the Alan Dulles side all the way through, and all these CIA directors have no power. They really don't. It's in the institution. The directors come in, but they have no power over what they are supposedly controlling.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that radical to even say that. Senator Pat Moynihan, who was not exactly an anti-war figure, called for breaking up the CIA. But we don't have any time for much more here. I do have to jump off the stream.
All right.
But we really thank you, Randy Credico, for all the work you continue to do for the freedom of Julian Assange and for bringing some humor to the situation. Do you want to close out with Reagan, George H.W. Bush, take us out?
I'll do my Bush. George W. Bush, who said, we are not at war with the people of Iraq. We are at war with the Iraqi people. All right, that's about it.
All right.
We're fighting cicadas. His son said, we gotta go in because we're fighting cicadas. Owls, cicadas. There's cicadas everywhere. I got to protect your freedom, the Patriot Act. I want to hide your freedom to protect your freedom. That's why we got to sign the Patriot Act. All right, never mind.
Give us some a little vintage HW before we go.
George H.W. Bush, when he said, remember he tried to get us in that war? He came out and he said, we're doing this for oil. And hey, you can't say that. Okay, to protect our way of life, just as bad. Restore democracy to Kuwait. No one's going to believe that. Oh, I got it. He's like Hitler. That's it. Use it. He's like Hitler. He's going into Poland. All right. That's it.
All right. Well, here we are again with the same rhetoric, courtesy of
that's right.
Joe Biden.
Radio station is being attacked by the Russians right now.
Yep. All right.
Thank you, guys.
For joining us at the
Keep up
Grayzone,
good work.
Grayzone.com, patreon.com/Grayzone. Check us out on Pacifica at KPFK 90.7 every Tuesday at 5 p.m. and WBAI, 99.5 FM in New York, every Sunday at 6 p.m.
Friday for me.
And Friday for Randy, Live on the Fly with Randy Credico. And you check out my podcast. Just search my name, Max Blumenthal, on Anchor FM or Spotify. And Aaron's got a million other gigs too. So
forget about it. You guys are all over. You guys are like John Kiriakou. You're everywhere, man. You know?
We're like him, except for
Aaron's on 3 channels at one time. How do you do it?
I don't know. You've
been cloned. I think you've been cloned. And he's done
simultaneously streaming right now somewhere else.
He's done a great job hosting, sub-hosting for Jimmy Dore. And that's a great show as well, Jimmy Dore Show. Thanks, guys.
All right, peace, everybody. Thanks, Randy.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.